It's Betfair Hurdle Day at Newbury on Saturday. Always a fantastic card, including the main race, but there's loads of graded action and competitive handicaps around that. I'll be steering clear of the Betfair Hurdle itself. It looks far too competitive for me. It's definitely going to be one to just watch and enjoy rather than get too heavily involved in. But I do think there are some other good bets on the card. The second race, the 150, a horse called AC Milan, who has burnt a few fingers already this season. Obviously was a very good bumper horse. He hasn't quite realised that sort of ability yet over hurdles, but I think that his run when he was second at Haydock back in November suggests that a mark in the low 130s is a lenient one. He hit the front too soon in a strongly run race that day, got nailed by Stony Mountain late on, but he shaped really well. He's not that much higher in the weights, and I think at Chepstow last time, A, it probably came a little bit too soon after a hard race that day, and B, he got embroiled in a bit of a battle for the lead again, which saw him tire in the closing stages. He's had 46 days off, which should get him back on track hopefully. He's represents a yard in excellent form, and I'm hoping that a mark in the low 130s can prove lenient at this attempt for AC Milan over hurdles. The second bet that I'm going to recommend, I may look rather stupid at about 2.32, tipping against Altior, because we know exactly what a good horse he once was. However, I don't really like the vibes around him this season. I think the fact that he's been it's been so indecisive what trip he's going to run at. He missed an engagement with an injury. He was, I think, very wound up for that Ascot run where he was beaten by Surname, and he was just beaten by a better horse on the day. That race has possibly left a mark on him, which has meant that he hasn't been seen since. So he will, obviously, he could still run a long way below his old best and still win this, but I'm working on the fact that he might run to a mark in the sort of high 160s, which is what he did when he scrambled home in last season's Champion Chase. If he does that, then he's not, some of the other rivals here haven't got that much to find if they're going to overturn him. The one that I've come down on in opposition to Altior is Kalashnikov, who does have to put a poor run at Newbury last time behind him. Sorry, it was at Cheltenham behind him. But he reportedly bled that day and had been suffering with a virus when he got home. So you can put a line through the Cheltenham run for Kalashnikov. You look back at his Newbury second over 2.5 miles when he was beaten by Old Grangewood, and that's a really good effort. He got in a battle with Glenn Forcer a long way from home, essentially shaped best on the day. He saw off Glenn Forcer and then just couldn't deal with Old Grangewood, who came later to claim him. Old Grangewood's gone in since. Kalashnikov was operating from a handicap mark of 155 that day, so it was a mighty effort. It was a career best effort from Kalashnikov, and if he can improve a little bit more on that, then he could well overthrow a below par Altior, I feel. Now he is dropping back in trip here. He's coming back to 2 miles from 2.5. I had a watch of the Arkle, last year's Arkle, just to make sure I was comfortable with him coming back in trip. The answer I came out with at the end of it was yes. The Arkle's usually a very well-run race, and I think it typically was soundly run in the early parts. Obviously, he was hampered and fell and unseated that day, Kalashnikov. But up until the point of that departure, he was travelling and jumping well, just in behind the pace, had no problem with the test of speed at 2 miles. So I'm hoping that he can be the one to upset Altior tomorrow, and he's about 8 to 1. It looks a fair price, I think, to upset the Fav in that really interesting race. So 4.10, final bet of the day, probably the most solid of the 3 that I'm putting up tomorrow, and a horse called Highest Sun, who was given a bit of a negative ride, I thought, last time at Warwick when he was sent off favourite for a Grade 2. I don't think that suited him, his jumping, or the nature of the track at Warwick. But John Joe O'Neill's Jr. is getting back on him today, and he has ridden this horse positively in the past. So I'm hoping to see John Joe O'Neill Jr. be be pretty prominent and handy with Highest Sun, and I'm thinking that a mark of 141 is probably a lenient one for him at some stage. He's got some really strong form going back through the season. He's basically, that run last time was his first poor run over fences, and some of his form is really strong prior to that. So Highest Sun in the 410 for a mark of 141, I'm thinking that looks lenient.